and welcome to Pipes and Pondering. One of the oldest storytelling tropes is that of the epic hero. Heroes that are even heroes when in the company of other heroes, whose stories have been told for literally thousands of years. We have Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh. We have numerous heroes from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, such as Achilles and Hector and Odysseus. We have Beowulf from the poem Beowulf. And this has been, like I said, something that we've seen throughout storytelling. And in more modern years, this has come up within the idea of superheroes, and then also with a lot of video games as well. Within modern discourse, though, surrounding not just superhero movies and video games, but also tying back into older works, a lot of critics condemn the lauding of such traditional epic heroes, arguing that such tales really promote violence and hatred. And while potentially I think that does happen at times, this video for today will assume that there is such a thing as a just war, which means you need to have just warriors. I won't go into detail trying to defend that. That's obviously a whole different argument, perhaps an argument for a future video that examines just war theory. But today we'll just focus on, are epic soldiers the best soldiers? Innately, we often think that they are, right? That we ask, okay, would we rather have a no-name Greek soldier or would we rather have Achilles? And innately, almost everyone would say, well, we'd rather have Achilles, right? Who is described by Homer as this sort of tornado. Why would you not prefer him to just a standard hero? But I would argue that with a lot of epic heroes are oftentimes a lot of epic faults. And that's something that I'd like us to take a look at today as we take a look and see what actually make epic heroes that wind up creating good versus epic heroes that wind up creating bad. I'd like us to start off by looking at a couple of historical examples from ancient Rome to kind of set our foundation, our basis. And I'd like to note that I am not a historian. My expertise is in English, so I might not have all these facts 100% accurate, but if nothing else, this is at least kind of within the general cultural consensus or cultural myth, even if it's not 100% historically accurate. So with these two epic heroes from Roman history, I'd like us to start off with an example of someone who wound up being a very bad epic hero, and that is Julius Caesar. Caesar, who is very famous from the Shakespearean play to Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquer, when it came to his campaigns in Gaul. It's important for us to understand that part of the reason why he was such a prominent politician is because he was such an epic hero, right? That he wound up becoming one of the Roman consuls and then was able to go off to war, win a lot of praise, a lot of victory. And even his political strategies were rather militant, right? Not necessarily actually wielding weapons, but extraordinarily aggressive, very much having a warrior's mindset. And the largest issue with Caesar was not that he was an epic hero, that he won all these accolades and was known as this great leader, but it was that he never stopped being militant. One of the reasons why he was assassinated was because it looked like he was just going to attain more and more power. That he never really knew when to put down the sword and when to stop conquering, whether it be outside Rome itself or within Rome. And I think that that's what makes a truly terrible epic hero. A hero that starts off a hero and, to quote Batman, eventually becomes a villain, right? Because he doesn't know when to lay down his arms. Now, a good counter to Julius Caesar is Cincinnatus. He was a Roman leader that was around 500 BC. Now, from my understanding, at least, from what we know about Cincinnatus, sources are scarce because obviously this is from a much older time period, even than Julius Caesar. But what everyone agrees on, from what I can tell, is that he was a great military leader. He was one of the leaders in Rome, and then after he had done campaigns, had been a phenomenal leader both on the battlefield and off the battlefield, he decided to give up all of his power and just go live on a farm and run his own farm, his own little world. And giving up that power is something that we can just look around us nowadays and see is highly, highly rare. And at 2 points later in his career, he was called back to power, that the people came and pled for him to come back to literally wield military might even. And after that, he stayed in power for a little bit afterwards, but both times he stepped down again. And I think it is in Cincinnatus that we see what an epic hero should truly strive to be. Obviously, on the battlefield, to be a wonderful commanding presence, a phenomenal warrior, but in order to actually help society when the battle is over, the epic hero has to be willing to lay down his arms and live a peaceful life. Otherwise, more chaos ensues, as we see with Julius Caesar. Now that we have our basic paradigm, understanding that a good epic hero is one that lays down his power upon the completion of his campaign versus a bad one is one that never gives up that power. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few modern examples and kind of flesh out this paradigm, as well as showing how it still applies to modern storytelling. I think one of the best examples in modern storytelling of a bad epic hero is Kratos from God of War. Now, I've only played the very original God of War, and then I played God of War 2016. So I'll only be talking about the very original God of War, because 2016 is an entirely different beast, where we see Kratos growing and becoming a very different character. But in the original God of War, we see Kratos as this phenomenal epic hero, one who is able to withstand hordes of enemies. And then when he's about to be slain, he pledges his life, his blood, to Ares, the god of war. And Ares winds up saving Kratos' life, giving him phenomenal power. And Kratos just goes berserk, winds up massacring town after town, army after army, refusing to lay down his arms, even though he has nothing to fight for except for the sake of fighting. And ultimately, when you fight for the sake of fighting, you wind up sacrificing those closest to you. And in the case of Kratos, he literally slays his wife and child. I think this is what we wind up seeing whenever an epic warrior refuses to lay down their arms. That we see Julius Caesar create chaos at home because he forces there to be internal strife. And with Kratos, we see this happen not just in a political sphere, but literally with slaying those closest to him. So we have Kratos on the far end of the spectrum of being a bad example of an epic hero. Now, I think that there is a middle section of this paradigm that is between the bad and the completely good. And I think that's the broken. And I want to talk about the Master Chief from the Halo franchise. That at the very end of Halo 4, Master Chief has gone through the loss of his closest friend, and arguably romantic partner, Cortana, who's an AI. A little awkward, but that's part of the lore. And he's mourning her loss, and he wonders, where's he supposed to go now? Those who have followed the series obviously knows he has lost so much more than just Cortana. And he's talking to one of the major officers at the end of Halo 4. And the officer asks, well, how are you handling all of this? Because obviously Master Chief is very closed off. He's very quiet. And Chief says, our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost. The Chief views that protecting humanity is the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter how much you have personally lost, you are called to keep going. quick side note, whatever the cost is honestly a very dark statement. The Master Chief is specifically referring to what he needs to give up. But whatever the cost can also tie into horrendous actions. And I think that a good epic hero, or a good hero period, doesn't fight whatever the cost, because honestly some costs are too great, because in fact there are greater costs than giving up your life. I think that's part of what ethics teaches us. But those thoughts aside, moving back to the Master Chief, he views, oh, this is just what I'm supposed to do, is being willing to give up everything. And this officer tells him that soldiers aren't machines, they're people. And this is obviously true, that we have a major issue with any sort of story that treats soldiers as just machines, right, that are supposed to go onto the battlefield and just endlessly fight. Gears of War is a really good example, right? The idea that the Coalition winds up just calling their strongest soldiers gears, that they're supposed to just be cogs within the machine. But moving back to Halo, we have this idea that Master Chief is supposed to grow and understand that he's not just a machine, he's a person. And there are a couple of potential relationships, one platonic, one romantic, that is hinted at the end of Halo 4 in that very last cutscene. And the cutscene itself is actually very hopeful, that you see Master Chief's armor being taken off, something you have never seen in the entire franchise, and then his helmet is being removed and it fades to black. This symbolism of his armor being taken off is extraordinarily hopeful, because it's implying that now he's learning to live life outside of his armor, learning to just be a normal human and not be a machine. However, the reason why I say that Master Chief is a broken hero and not just a good hero is that he has no understanding of what it means to just be a human. But if you delve a little bit into the Halo lore, you realize that the Master Chief, as well as all of his Spartan brothers and sisters, were taken away from their families at age 6 and trained in this private facility, and their entire life has been warfare. Now, Kratos obviously is a far worse example of an epic hero than Master Chief. Master Chief is not outright slaughtering innocents, but he is broken, that he can't just go into society and start living, because he doesn't know what that means anymore. Before moving on to my example of a completely good epic hero, really need to make a quick comment about the idea that there is a very fine line between being broken and good as an epic hero. And in fact, I think there's also a very legitimate point to be said that even good epic heroes are broken in some fundamental way, right? That you can be good and learn to adapt to society once you get back from war, but that's part of the reason why we have the idea of PTSD, right? That even warriors that are able to come back to a family that they've known, unlike the Master Chief who had no one to come back to, they still struggle, right, because of war. But I think epic heroes should be able to come back and learn to integrate into society. When it comes to the exact difficulties of that with PTSD, obviously I am not qualified to talk about that at all, but I think that this is at least an ideal to strive for. Now, moving on to my last example, though, I'd like to talk about Olberic from Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler is a JRPG that came out a number of years ago, and Olberic is the warrior class, and he is known as the Unbending Blade. He is someone who is a phenomenal warrior is able to cut down literally entire battalions by himself, fending them off. However, before his official story begins with an Octopath Traveler, we know that he has a tragic past, that despite all of his skill, he wound up failing to protect his king and country, and because of that, he was left homeless. And in despair, he flees to a small town called Cobblestone to just serve as a town guard. He goes from being the second greatest knight in the entire kingdom to just being a guard in a random town. And eventually, he winds up being called forth on this quest to avenge his king. And eventually he does succeed in doing so, and he's able to preserve other nations, preventing them from falling like his nation did, once again serving as the unbending blade. But as his story comes to a conclusion, he realizes that his purpose in life doesn't have to be to protect entire kingdoms, and instead, protecting a small village is sometimes all that's needed. And so, instead of choosing some other magnificent kingdom to serve in order to puff up his pride, his prestige, and his station, he just returns to Cobblestone. Even though he could serve as a vassal to any kingdom on the continent, he chooses to serve a small village. And when he does so, he winds up becoming a foster father figure to a young boy, thereby symbolically laying down his arms, choosing not to live a life of warfare. True, he is a guard, but he's not seeking out battles, right? At this point, he is playing on the defensive, trying to protect what he loves rather than going out and trying to fight and find as many battles as possible. And it's in Ulbrich, in, I believe, this paragon of the good epic hero, that we see that the point of being a warrior is not to fight wars. That if the point of fighting is just fighting for the sake of fighting, then Kratos was right. It doesn't matter who you slaughter, who you kill. But obviously Kratos is wrong, fundamentally. The point of being a warrior is not for the sake of fighting, but it is in order to protect the good way of life. And that's what Ulbrich realizes, that the small town contains people that are trying to live good lives, right? Trying to protect themselves, protect others, to love others. And Ulbrich realizes that living a quiet life is what people should strive to live, and that a warrior is the one who tries to stand between the disruption and the destruction of that way of life and whatever enemy comes at their gates. Video games overall are one of the main mediums of exploring the concept of epic soldiers, and we see an entire spectrum, right? We see Kratos as an evil example of an epic soldier who fights epic battles successfully but has no moral backing. We see the Master Chief as someone who does hold ethics, but who is fundamentally broken because he has no clue what to do when the fighting is over. Then we see heroes such as Ulbrich from Octopath Traveler that are epic heroes, but when they finish their quest, they want to lay down their arms and live a quiet life, that they want to serve as fathers, as just a standard townsperson. And these stories shouldn't be written off as just examples of pop culture media. I think that these are modern tellings of the ancient trope of the epic warrior, and teaching people what the importance of war is and how to respond to it ethically and unethically. Instead of dismissing these tales, we should ask what we should learn from them. What should we avoid from Kratos' story of villainy, or the Master Chief's brokenness? Most importantly, what should we strive towards? Cincinnatus and Ulbrich teach us that epic soldiers are not inherently the best soldiers. Rather, the ideal warrior is the one capable of laying down arms when the fighting is finished, wanting to live a good life rather than a violent one. Let me know if you have any other questions about this. This is obviously a very large concept, trying to condense it into a short video. Let me know if you have any critiques of it, any qualms. Let me know if you have any other examples of epic soldiers that you'd like me to talk about in an epic video, or just to share your thoughts in the comments below. Hope everyone has a phenomenal day, and I'll see y'all next time. Cheers.